This program is made possible by the loyal financial support of the friends and partners of Family Policy Institute.
You are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world.
Well, it's a great privilege to be speaking to Ted Beahr, the chairperson of the Christian Film and Television Commission based in Los Angeles, California, and also the publisher of Movie Guide here at the World Congress of Families in Salt Lake City, Utah. Ted, it's always a privilege to speak to you.
I love seeing you. Every time I see you, it's like, it's just beautiful.
Thank you.
You bring encouragement. And what is it that Paul says? Encourage one another while the days are short. So
Absolutely.
You do that.
I always love your presentations wherever I am with these conferences all over the world. I make sure that I listen in because I always learn something new. So your presentations on the media-wise family, on protecting children from the negative influences of popular media and culture in Hollywood is gold as far as I'm concerned. So it's a great honor to be speaking to you. But we're speaking to largely a South African audience, an African audience as well. This show goes up right through Africa. And one of the things that we have a heart for is to inform, educate, and equip parents with the tools to help protect their children. And you speak a lot about the media-wise family. You've written a book about that. Tell us what a media-wise family is.
Well, media-wise family has two parts to it. One of them is you have to build in those principles to your children so they start self-governing and they start determining that they're going to choose the good, the true, and the beautiful, and not choose the negative and the erotic and the scatological and the cruel and the unhappy. So you can build in those principles. We brought together 60 professors when I was head of the departments at City University of New York in the late 1970s, and they did the first media literacy class, and we put a biblical base on it, and it works. We do it all over the world. We teach this in Korea. We taught in one facility like this hotel, and they put us in a smaller room like the room yesterday, and people were lined up, so they put us in the baseball stadium because the Korean parents do not want their children to grow up leaving the faith.
Yeah. Now, whenever you speak, whenever you do even a breakout session, like yesterday,
right?
There was standing room only. We couldn't even get people.
I saw you standing in the back.
Right at the back, because I couldn't get in. And the reason for it, I understand, is that people all over the world understand instinctively that what you're saying is true, and it's a huge problem all over the world. So I'm going to tell you what is happening in South Africa right now.
Right.
Parents don't understand the power of the media and the impact it's having on their children. And in South Africa today, we have teenage pregnancies that's off the charts. Yeah. We have young children as young as 8, 9, and 10 engaging in sexual activity. They're producing their own little videos with their cell phones, having sex and sharing that with their friends. It's called sexting.
I know.
It's a phenomenon in South Africa. Children,
and all over the world.
Right. And I know, and you know, that the influence is coming through the popular media. It's through television, it's through movies that are teaching that this is cool, this is okay. And Movie Guide, the book that you publish on a monthly basis, helps people understand, helps parents understand how to, evaluate what movies are good for their children to view and what are not. So tell us a little bit about Movie Guide.
I need you to do a commercial for me because you are great. Your summer was great. I was starting to say there are two parts. One, when you learn how to do those principles, and then we know how to teach kids to be media wise. We've done it for years. That was my point. So they're principles, they're 5 steps. We know what to do. We know how to do it. We know when to do it. But on the second side is you have to constantly be aware of knowing before your kids watch something.
That's right.
And that's what Movie Guide does. When our biggest audience, we get about 34 million in the United States. We're on Nielsen, we're rated, we're all of this stuff. But we don't get 34 million because it's a blessing to us. We get 34 million because there are a lot of mothers out there, our biggest audience. But our second biggest audience we found were 12 to 24-year-old. There are a lot of children who don't want to get caught in sexting. There are a lot of children who don't want to throw away their values. They were here yesterday and throughout the session. So we need to equip them And I know one radio host said to me one day, I'm just doing a concrete example, he said, I'm so grateful my daughter wanted to see this comedy, and in the comedy, they're playing hockey and a woman's head gets cut off and is used as a puck. She read that in Movie Guide. We don't say go or not go, but we're trying to develop discernment. My daughter read that and she said, I'm going to tell all my friends not to go.
There you go.
Because somebody thinks this is funny to cut somebody's head off and use it as a hockey. They might think it's funny in Syria, but it's not funny in the United States.
Absolutely. And also the demeaning of women in
Yeah.
these movies, which has a devastating effect in South Africa.
Now, I have to tell you some good news, because I don't want everybody out there just to be focused on the problem. We have the solutions to the family problem, but also when we started, there was only one movie with positive Christian content.
Yes.
Now it's up to 60%. And the movies that are coming out that are going to hit South Africa a little later are the 33, about the 33 miners trapped in Chile, 2,300 feet
That's
down.
right. I remember that.
Perfect. Risen, about the resurrection of Christ, starring Joseph Fine. Wonderful. And then you have, right after that, you have got the Young Messiah, which I screened last night, which is opening on Easter. It's theologians were coming up to me today and saying, we love this movie. This movie is going to give us another way to reach people with the gospel of Christ. God's Not Dead, Ben-Hur, the Ten Commandments. You are going to get a flood of these movies. And the reason we've done this, the number of R-rated movies has gone down from 82% to 30%. The reason we're doing this is to equip you and to protect your children and grandchildren. So there's two parts. One, teach your children to be wise, monitor what they do, and then make sure you choose the good movies, because I've gone to a lot of work to get these good movies out there.
So, Ted, I just want to help our audience understand how this is happening. All these family-friendly movies, movies that are positive about the gospel of Jesus Christ, is not coming about just because Hollywood had a change of mind. It's because of people like Ted Beahr. So he works with all the top Hollywood bosses in Hollywood, the top movie studios. And
I can tell you specifically how we do it.
Okay.
And you should do it in South Africa with their film industry. We do a detailed economic analysis of the box office. And whatever these people's political position is, they want to make money. And
right.
they want
Bottom
to
line.
keep their empires. And you can't have an empire that isn't fed on money. So we show them how to make more money. So we've shown them, for instance, that if you do a pro-abortion film, you lose money. So you know there's an increase in pro-life films, so much so that Variety, the big industry, says, why are there so many pro-life films? Because we show them you make more money. Everybody loves a woman who's saving a baby. They don't love the other side of the coin. There are more movies without gay characters. I'm sorry to say, I'm not trying to be mean to anybody, but because we've been doing this, we've shown that if you add one of those characters to a movie, so GLAAD, the Gay Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation, came out with a report this May and said, we are so upset. They're the top 15 movies, none of them have gay characters. Well, that's because I show them you got to make more money. You can't survive to give to Hillary Clinton unless you make more money.
So movies with family-friendly content
do more. Why?
Do better.
Why?
Because most people want a positive message.
Because it's better to sell 4 tickets to a family than 1 ticket to somebody who's a little bit bent and disoriented. I mean, 4 to 1. So if you look at the big movies every year, the big movies are animated movies like Despicable Me and Frozen. Frozen did about $6 billion at the box office. Do you know that Frozen opens up with a Christian song? The director's son married my secretary.
Okay, I
The
didn't know
first song in Frozen is Fairest Lord Jesus in Danish. Now, if those of you who've heard Fairest Lord Jesus, if you listen, you can pick up the melody right away. In Danish. So what do we care if it's in Danish? It could be in anything.
But most people don't know that.
And then the 4 stories are like C.S. Lewis's 4 loves. The first love is the one of the sisters falls in love with herself, and she practically destroys the world. Self-love does not work. The second one is romantic love, and the guy she falls in love with takes advantage of her. That's the true story of every woman. The third story is friendship, and friendship melts. And only selfless giving, when she's willing to sacrifice herself for her sister, triumphs over the frozen heart that the sister has, that frozen heart of selfishness. This is a biblical story.
Absolutely.
And it's $6 billion. The movies we saw yesterday.
$6 billion.
$6 billion.
Grief.
And that means a lot of people see it, and a lot of children see it. So whatever you think out there, we're helping Hollywood make money. Don't complain, because we're helping make money by making more movies with Christian faith, more movies that are evangelical, more movies with values, and it's changed. When we started, there were 6 family films. Now they're 40% of the films are family films.
And we
just
that,
show them how to make money.
We noticed
That's
that.
all.
We can see that in South Africa as well. Heaven is for Real. All of these
Right.
has a huge impact, and Christians can use that to evangelize. So, but we want to thank you for the work you do.
I want to get you to
because
help with some of these movies. I got to get you to come to our gala, to be there.
You've been saying that for years.
You got to meet these people.
No.
Because I don't work for the industry. What I do is I advise the industry. I won't take money from Focus Features and Universal for the movie last night. I don't want to take their money, because then I'm beholden to them.
That's right.
That means I live on a missionary budget, by the way. But it also means that I can speak the truth. They had a little bit of kenosis problem, we removed that. A little monophysitism, I'd remove that. A little homoousian. Imagine telling a bunch of wonderful Jewish guys from Universal what homoousianism is. All that means is that Jesus was fully God and fully man. And since they're portraying Jesus in the temple as a young boy, how do you show that? So we fixed it, talking to a bunch of people who don't even understand what that is.
It's
For
incredible.
your benefit.
Yeah, it's incredible the work you do. I saw in your Movie Guide magazine you had Stevie Wonder, Jonathan Butler, which comes from South Africa, at your gala dinner.
But you didn't come from South Africa. You got
I
to
wasn't
come.
there.
And you got to bring your wife. She's
And my
beautiful.
crew, and my TV crew, we want to come. Perhaps
You can
maybe
be press. You can interview these people. You can connect with these people.
we want to do that.
Because
I know it's $1,000.
not as your press.
Not if I'm press.
Press is
so
free.
there, my entire audience here heard that Ted Beahr
If you're press, but you got
invited me to the gala dinner.
But you got to
and
apply for press credentials.
I will.
And then you bring some people who buy tickets because, they're your good friends.
Absolutely. So, Ted, how do people get hold of Movie Guide online?
Go to movieguide.org, movieguide.org. And if you want to know about the gala, we've got movieguideawards.com. Movieguide is also .com, but we like .org because it means nonprofit. And we have many different things, the Culture-Wise Family. We have tools. We have a 6-part series for churches on teaching your kids to be culture-wise. People who don't like to read, we give them a visual series like, the Purpose-Driven Life that helps people, guides them through in 6 parts, small groups at churches to help their children to be culture-wise.
So how can people get hold of these materials?
Go to movieguide.org.
Okay, everything is there.
And if you can't, email me or my secretary, Ted@movieguide. Well, don't all email me. I'll be swamped.
Ted@movieguide.org. Okay, so finally, just briefly explain to the South African parents why they need to be more vigilant and why they need to protect their children from what they're viewing on television and in the theaters.
Right. Everything flows downstream from the media. The media creates the culture. If you don't know that, in the Bible it says in the beginning was the Word was with God. How do we learn the Word? We learn through the preaching of the gospel of Jesus. As Christians, we know the influence of the Bible. I came to Christ through the Bible after being a really bad left-wing person. At the age of 28, I came to Christ. My life was turned around by the Word of God. So that's happened to C.S. Lewis, happened to a lot of people who are much better than I am. But the fact of the matter is, the advertisers in the United States spend $74 billion on advertising. They spend millions of dollars advertising on a silly football game. You wouldn't call it football, but we call it football. So it has a tremendous impact. They wouldn't buy commercials for millions of dollars. And there have been 500,000 or more studies on the influence of the media, so much so that Congress said the evidence is irrefutable. This is stealing your children. 90% of the children in the United States are leaving the faith of their parents. 90%. That means we're quickly going back into paganism. We're going back into a debauched area of life. We need to rescue those families. No, I get families all the time who say, we don't want my children to abandon the faith, but what am I going to do? We have the tools to help you make a difference, to strengthen your children, to give them a purpose in life that'll help them to see the value of seeking Jesus so they have a more abundant life. So go to movieguide.org and find out more about it.
Ted, thank you so much for the work that you do. We
God
bless
bless
you.
Thank you.
We hope to see you in South Africa soon. We need to get you there. You do incredible work here in the United States, but we need you in Africa as well.
I love South Africa. I shot a couple little missionary films there. I love it.
Okay, so we hope to see you there soon.
So we're trying to help you by cleaning up Hollywood to make your life better. Is that okay? Different children have a propensity for different things. Some have a propensity for violence. We know from hundreds of thousands of studies, when I was head of the department at Berkeley, it was 500,000 studies, that 7 to 11% want to copy the violence, and you see that in the shootings and things like that. If you take that group about violence, another group wants to have more violence, but they don't copy it. Another group they don't say it doesn't infect them or bother them. And a fourth group gets scared by the violence. A congressional study finds that to argue against the influence of violence in media is like arguing against gravity. But this applies to everything. And I won't go into the details, but every single propensity, the propensity for drugs. I was a pudgy little teddy bear growing up on the streets of New York. My father was in the theater, so I would get beat up. So I had a propensity toward drugs, not toward violence, because I wasn't the guy big enough, tall enough to beat up other people. Forgive me. Sex. I mean, these are ads that you can see anywhere and Don will talk about it. Sex is being pushed on young girls, and the more they see role models that they can't compete with in terms of image, the worse they feel about themselves. And, there's a link between pornography and lower brain mass. You'll hear more about that. And children abandoning their parents' values. This is such a crisis. 2 of my children, 4, went to Wheaton. Anybody know Wheaton in Illinois? 2 of you. 3. I'm shocked. That's where Billy Graham went. So when the first one went to Wheaton, they were when they voted, they were voting their values. By the time my Robbie, who you meet here, went to Wheaton, they said they took this all together and they said they don't understand the Bible. We got to teach them Bible 101. We got to teach them how many books in the Bible. We got to tell them they're basically ignorant. And a study came out from Barna that they're not reading. So this is yesterday or last week, and so they were voting something different than their parents' values. The church has backed off from its mission territories. During the golden age of Hollywood, they cleaned up movies. My father was a movie star at that time. You couldn't kiss the horse. And then in the 60s, the church left Hollywood, and you went from the greatest story ever told to the first second. They were pushing Satanism after that. That's what most of you remember here, how bad it was. If you remember before the 60s, it was clean, it was wholesome, it was good. And the church shut down. The Southern Baptists pulled their funding. I hope Paige and Dorothy aren't in here because they'll complain about that, but that's what happened. They were 60% of the funding was the Southern Baptists, and they said we shouldn't be involved in movies. We should be involved in movies. We should be involved in entertainment. This is just a tool. And we should be using the tool. Universal Pictures, that did 50 Shades of Grey, is doing the movie you're seeing tonight, Young Messiah. They didn't make money, by the way, with 50 Shades of Grey. Are you happy about that? So, since they didn't make money, they want a movie that makes money, so they did Young Messiah about Jesus. In fact, the new head of Universal is Catholic, whatever you think of that. He actually wants to do a whole slate of Christian films. So they're going to be doing more and more Christian films. And strong Christian content always does better at the box office. I want you to think about that for a second. In other words, the world is on your side. These are the keys to media wisdom. Understand the influence of the media. Does everybody understand that the media has a tremendous influence on their children? Raise your hand. I want to know that you're okay.
Well, I'm going to talk about pornography, and my goal is to help you, to equip you with ways to help protect your family, particularly children in your life, from the harms of pornography. Just to be clear, we're talking about the depiction of erotic behavior that's intended to cause sexual excitement. This could be video, photos. It can also be written language like novels or magazines like 50 Shades of Grey or Cosmopolitan magazine. They have similar effects. And the pornography today, I want to be clear as well, that it's not just pictures of topless women anymore. That is not what we're talking about. We're talking about very violent, very degrading, much more deviant types of material, that's what is mainstream. That is what our children are seeing when they first go onto Google and look up the word sex. Another difference today is that it is available. You can get it almost anywhere. You can get it anonymously. You don't have to go down to the corner store anymore. You can carry it around in your pocket, and nobody necessarily has to know that you're even looking at this stuff. And it's affordable. There is so much of it that is free. And then it's important to also understand that the pornographer's tactics have evolved, but I'll spend some more time on their tactics in just a few minutes. A few harms of pornography are, a lot of people argue that this is just a moral issue. We changed our name from Morality in Media to the National Center on Sexual Exploitation this year. It is a moral issue. It is a spiritual issue. It hurts us spiritually, and it definitely separates us from God. But there is also a public health crisis right now. There are reams of research indicating the social costs of pornography, how it is impacting men, women, and children as individuals, how it's affecting families, and how it's affecting our culture. Men, women, and children are developing dependencies and addictions. These often last for their entire lives, these struggles. It is destroying families. Countless families have broken up because of pornography. 56% of divorces, this is from a 2003 study, so it's quite outdated, but 56% of divorces cited internet pornography as a major contributing factor to the breakup of their marriage. You can bet that it's much higher than that now in 2015. It exploits women and children. Much pornography depicts particularly violence and aggression towards women. It objectifies them. Performers are often coerced and forced. I have spoken with dozens of women and some men who work in the porn industry, both who are out of it and still continue to work in it. And all of the people I've talked with talk about what their life was like before, what drove them to get involved in pornography. These are not individuals who are happy to be performing in these films or in these photographs. They are often under duress. They often come from abused families. They often feel like they have no other financial way of making a living or caring for their families. So it's important to understand, too, that when we're watching this material, the people we're watching, they're not happy. They are very much being sexually exploited. We know that pornography increases the demand for child sexual abuse images or child pornography. It increases the demand for prostituted and trafficked women and children. And increasingly, we're hearing that young men in their 20s and 30s are struggling with sexual dysfunction and erectile dysfunction, increased sexual diseases right now among youth in our culture. There's a study recently, just I think about 18 months ago, that came out in the UK. 4 out of 5 15 to 16-year-olds said that they've been engaged in group sex. What does that mean? What does that mean for our kids if this is what the culture is that they're living in? Particularly how pornography harms kids. It has an impact on their psychological, physical, and social development. When kids are getting their sex ed from pornography instead of from their parents, they're learning that sex equals porn sex, that sex is violent, it should be violent. It means they're learning that no really means yes, that women enjoy being treated in objectifying and degrading ways. We are also teaching our kids that this adult entertainment is normal and acceptable. Kids want to be like adults, right? They want to be cool, they want to be just like you, they want to fit in. And so when we're showing them that this is what adults do and how we treat each other, kids are going to try it out as well. We see increased child-on-child sexual abuse as well. Our courts are overwhelmed with it. We see now children creating and distributing child sexual abuse images. They're creating and distributing child pornography themselves. This is the world that we live in now. Our goal is to help expose the seamless connections between all forms of sexual violence. Not only does pornography harm the family, but it is also connected very much to sexual violence, to increased sexual abuse among children, to child pornography, to sex trafficking, to prostitution, to all of these things, to rape. These things are not happening in a vacuum. And I encourage all of you, as you're out talking with others and you're hearing stories in the media, to help people understand that trafficking and the problem with sexual assault in the military, these aren't just isolated incidences. The problem with increased rape on our college campuses, this isn't an isolated incident, but rather pornography is very much a contributing factor to these issues. One thing I just find so fascinating is that when we are getting ready to engage in a sexual act or intimacy with our husband or our wife, our brain sends out all of these chemicals. Physically, we change. We get very excited. Dopamine, norepinephrine is released, right? We're able to focus on our partner. We get excited for what's coming. We trust them. We're focusing on the emotions and the moment and not just the physical act itself. Wonderful when we are about to have sex with our husband, right? Terrible when you're viewing pornography. The same chemicals are released when you're viewing pornography, except instead of focusing on your spouse, you're instead focusing on the pixels on the screen. You're instead concentrating on the physical act itself. And, right, this is terrible. We don't want to do that. We want to connect with other human beings. We want to feel love and that connection. Now, after you engage in an intimate act with your spouse, endorphins are released, oxytocin, serotonin, etc. This helps you to feel satisfied. It helps you to remember this moment as a great memory. It helps you, it increases the bond and the trust that you feel with that person. Wonderful again with your spouse. But with pornography, very little of this stuff is released. Very few endorphins are released in the brain. And so instead of getting that satisfaction, you want more, you seek that high continually. And that is part of the reason why often porn users can spend hours and hours looking at this stuff. It actually changes the brain. One thing to focus on, though, is our brains are plastic. They change over time. My little sister's 13. I just saw her on Sunday on my way out here to Utah. She's so boy crazy. She was telling me about, the crushes that she has. I was very boy crazy when I was 13, too. I'm not attracted to 13-year-olds anymore, right? Thank goodness.
I hope not.
Yeah. But because I've changed, my brain has matured, I've grown. I love my husband who's 35, and I'm very attracted to him. My brain changed with me. That is what is supposed to happen. Here's a picture of grandparents of some of my friends, great-grandparents, on their 83rd wedding anniversary.
Wow.
This is what we're meant to have. We're meant to have this long-lasting, deep, abiding connection with another human being and to grow old with them. We're meant to still find one another attractive when we are 104 and 101 years old, right?
Wow.
But the problem with pornography is instead of becoming that incredible bond with another human being, you've developed that bond with pictures, and this disrupts it. But because our brains are plastic, they can change back, and we very much can overcome these kinds of struggles. And I just think that's wonderful. God has made our bodies so perfectly that even when we mess up and we find ourselves struggling and dependent on these things, we can overcome it. Even physically, our brains can be changed back. So, by the time our kids are in high school, America's porn-fed youth have amassed an encyclopedic knowledge of smut. This is very true. I think it's hard to find an 18-year-old boy or young woman who has not been exposed to pornography. And if it's not just hardcore pornography, walking outside, you're bombarded with these images everywhere you go. Turning on the television, you're bombarded with pornified and highly sexualized material. I can't believe this. It changed. I can't believe that it's this easy now, but a famous female pornographer, has explained, it's not even hard to find girls anymore who are willing to perform in pornography, who are willing to be treated with such violent and degrading acts, because the girls today are coming to the set porn ready. That's what our culture is doing to them. And so I plead with you to try to do something about this. We can protect our kids. We can help change our communities. But we have to stand up. We have to recognize what dangers are right at our door. just briefly, the pornographers are so smart. They're so deceiving. You know, we recently in our office got together for 3 days to brainstorm how we can take down the porn industry. I bet you that they do the same thing, how they can take down our families. And they're so good at it. How many families have been destroyed now? Very much because of pornography. They're the ones pushing technology. Right now, pornography, it's so much of it is online. It's hard to find softcore pornography when you go online. And as you're looking at it, just harder material keeps popping up. I love watching YouTube videos about members of the military coming home and surprising their kids. I can spend hours watching it. And I just find myself on YouTube, you know, I'm watching one and then there's like 20 more on the right side of the same thing, and I just keep clicking and I'm crying and it's wonderful. Probably shouldn't waste as much time as I do. But pornography sites are often set up similarly, where you just can keep clicking and clicking and clicking, and the material becomes harder and more deviant, and especially for our children who aren't sexually active or haven't been exposed to this kind of material. They're curious, and they can't help themselves from clicking even more to see what other things us adults are engaging in. Also, the pornographers are very good at duping us. They often use innocent keywords. They misspell things. Disney.co was a hardcore porn site. How many times do you think people accidentally forgot the M when they were going to the Disney website? Whitehouse.com was a porn site for a long time. Excuse me. Because the real White House one is .gov. Thankfully, they got it back. They used expired or similar domain names. They use bait and switch tactics. Let me just, a quick story. A couple of years ago, a woman called me just so upset. She was with her 6-year-old daughter. Her daughter loves the American Girl dolls. They wanted to play some games online. So she was sitting with her daughter on her lap, went to the computer, typed in American Girl doll games, and up popped a ton of pornography, hardcore pornography. That was all that there was on the first page of Google. She was even with her daughter, and her daughter was still exposed to this stuff. I mean, how terrible. How many kids do you think are going and looking for American Girl doll things online? Probably tons. My little sister loves American Girl doll. But the good news is we called the American Girl doll company and let them know, and immediately they increased their search engine optimization and got everything fixed, thankfully. So this isn't a problem, but how many other things are similar to this that our kids are finding that we don't even know about as their parents? We have some tactics too. There's so much that we can do. There is a lot of hope. A few things I would say that are first and foremost is that we have to protect ourselves. We need to make sure that we are free and clear from these things, that we've put up safeguards to protect ourselves as parents, as grandparents, as people who are working with children. We should develop family traditions. It's so important to create an environment where kids feel like they can come to you on any issue. And if you have traditions, if you spend time together regularly, I think things like having dinner together, having a night where you are just with your family, maybe without any kind of media, going to the park together, those kinds of things help foster an environment where your children feel safe and able to come talk to you about the things that they're experiencing in the world. It's important to use the tools that are available. There are so many filters right now. I love Covenant Eyes. I think it's one of the best. I think Net Nanny is another good one. But pretty much all the filters out there right now, they're all pretty good. They might be annoying to set up, but what's worse, spending that hour setting up the difficult filter or having your children exposed to this hardcore pornography and their lives ruined? I would say you need to have frequent discussions with your children and spouse. And these discussions, I think it's important to explain, you shouldn't start these discussions like, hey, so did you look at porn lately? They're going to be on the defensive immediately. You want to say, so when's the last time that you saw pornography? What happened? How did you feel? What did you do? You want to help make it a safe place. And the reality is that most of us are seeing it whether or not we're seeking it out or not, because it's coming into our lives whether we want it to or not. It's important to be able to set a good place where we can talk about that. Get educated and stay up to date on the latest dangers. This is very hard. A couple of ideas I have are go to the filtering websites. They have incredible blogs, and they're the ones doing all the work for us, what the most dangerous apps are today, what the online dangers are. I go to the filtering websites to keep up to date. Once a month, just go back and read all of their articles. That's a great way. You can speak up too. I encourage you to say something in your communities. One time I was on an airplane and the guy was watching pornography in front of me. I went crazy. I started yelling at him on the airplane, and I made a YouTube video that went viral. It was not very fun time. I got a lot of flack from it, but as a result, every airline, except for American Airlines, changed their policy to no longer allow pornography on the airlines. Really great,
Bravo.
right?
Bravo.
So I just want to say, I'm just someone just asking for people to step up and to change these policies, and I encourage you to do it too. Sometimes people say no to me, and it just makes me a little more mad, so I go get more people to help me. But sometimes they just say yes that easily. We simply asked Hyatt hotels to remove pornography, and they removed it last week.
Praise God.
Right? So you can do it too. I would argue pornography is a public health crisis. I encourage you to start using language like that. We have a book here. I unfortunately ran out within 2 hours of the opening of the conference. But if you want these, we will mail them to you. You can sign up for them in the back. We have an action center with over 75 actions you can take from home by making calls, signing petitions. You guys might think these aren't important, but Hilton told us that they got 1,000 emails a week at the beginning of the year, and that's why they got rid of pornography, because people like you are willing to step up and take action. So if you're afraid of standing up and yelling on the airplane like me, you can just sit at home and help too. This is very important. I just want to close by encouraging you all as parents, grandparents, leaders, to step up and do all you can to help defend dignity and to oppose sexual exploitation in all of its forms. And thank you so much for coming to this.
Okay, I'm going to ask Pat Fagan to come up and present information that I love. Thank you, Don.
Well, thank you, Ted. Thank you, Don. Thank you very much for the work you do. And I'm glad. I've less and less temptations every time I go to a hotel now. And any man here who's a man knows it's a temptation. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
My wife thanks you too.
Amen.
God thanks you too.
Amen.
Okay, I want to quickly go over some of the main tasks, because I think one of the big things, the tasks we have to do in this whole area, is essentially grow the wheat. This is the work of us. Yes, we need to pull out the tares at times, but the main way that you kill the tares is by growing enough wheat. Our Lord gives us that in one of the main parables. Through the night, an enemy came, sowed tares in the thing, and what does he say? Leave that grow. Wait till the harvest. In between, just grow the wheat. Now, how do we grow the wheat? First and foremost, in your own marriage, in your own sexuality, which has 3 people involved. You, your spouse, and God. You saw the data that I was giving you before? There are 3 involved, always. And the better the presence of the third person, the more you see the fullness of your spouse. Amen. The more the spouse is with God, the more they see the fullness of you, and the two of you can really rejoice. That is what you have to transmit to your children, and before they become teenagers. By the time they're becoming teenagers, their task now is to begin to move into independence. Their brain is working that way. Their peers become more important. If you leave it till then, it's too late. You've let the clock run out. This education starts very early, right at the beginning. First with modesty in the home, modesty in dress between the boys and girls, husband
Amen.
And wife. The bedroom is a sacred place. The boys don't go into the girls' bedroom. The girls don't go into the boys' bedroom. Common sense. The other thing is, actually, I'm going to be very frank here. Any parent who has a teenager who has a cell phone with full access to the internet has parental child abuse going on in their own family, under their own nose, their own fault. Now, that's a very tough one. But these are tough times. Our kids are targets for some of the most evil men. We have to step up to the plate. Do kids need mode of communication? Yes. Do they need a cell phone? Yes. Let it be a simple one. But not an internet access one, not till they're old enough. The school where my kids go to, the school has a thing, you leave the phone at the front desk as you come in. They can't access it during the day.
Bravo.
Why? Because of this. The school, at least, is saying, we're going to take charge, and they're teaching the parents, by the way, you should be doing the same thing. Let me tell you an anecdote. We had a prenuptial agreement, myself and my wife. I grew up in Ireland. We never heard of prenuptial agreements, but I had one imposed on me by my wife, who grew up, 13 children, no TV in the home. The prenuptial agreement was no TV. I was, a young psychologist, knew something. I agreed to it. But we were a movie family. Saturday night
you get
was
movie
night,
right?
We had movie night.
Yeah.
Saturday night, and it became a prime night. And this was a great vehicle. We loved the movies. The kids looked forward to it. And on Sunday then, we would discuss the movie. And gradually, they became quite media-wise.
Amen.
What was the content? Why did you like it? Who's a good actor? Why is a good actor? Who wrote the story?
Yep.
In this scene, what was the director doing? You remember the way you reacted to that? Do you know there's a guy at the camera, but behind the camera is the director who's making all this happen so that emotional response comes from you to that? Was he being a good director? Was he doing good things to your soul, your imagination, your mind? Your kids need to understand that by the time they're teens, so that they're not manipulated. They become savvy about the media. My wife, we homeschooled our kids for a certain length of time, and because there was no TV, books were a key thing. And she's developed a thing called a mother's list of books, where from age 3 up to 17, she's got hundreds and hundreds of books that she's vetted for 3 things. 1, they have to be an interesting story, because the kids are not going to read them if they're not interesting. 2nd, morally have to be okay. So there's no transmission of bad morals in the book. And 3rd, the authority of the parents, and particularly of the father, has to be upheld. Why particularly of the father? Because this is one of the feminist ways in kids' books. They're undermining the family by detracting the man. The man is the object. Now, in a way, what Ted is doing here is similar. Vetting the movies, knowing the movies that your kids see, you have to take charge. If you don't take charge, you're leaving the taking charge to somebody else. And the people who are wanting to take charge of your children don't have their best intentions in mind like you. Ted, I'm going to propose a movie for you, for us, for guys my age, for women my age. Can some director, set, group out in Hollywood come up with some movies that really inspire us grandparents to know how to interact with our grandchildren and our children in leading our kids on towards the good life? To model for us, now more older people, how to influence the younger generation towards good. The imagination is key. The imagination is extraordinarily powerful. I was a clinical psychologist, and one of the things I began to look into and investigate, and I would have developed this a lot more, is the power of hypnosis. Hypnosis is a very misguiding term, actually. I'd throw it out. What it really is harnessing the imagination. That's what it does. And the imagination is the bridge between the intellect, everything you've learned, and the will and the good. It facilitates that going forward. Train your kids' imagination. Good movies feed into the imagination and plant great images that are then very helpful to us to go towards the good. The struggle, the defeat, and then the coming out and going forward and all the rest. Forming the imagination is key. You have to make sure your kids' imaginations are formed and that they realize this is a power and a potential. The imagination is a tremendous potential or potentiator on going towards the good. Today, tonight, or tomorrow, or over the weekend, husband and wife together, begin to imagine the children you want and the grandchildren you want your children to have. What sort of men and women are they going to be? Can they grow up to take part in all of these major tasks, the task of family, of church, of school, of marketplace, of government, of citizenship. That has to be formed well in your imagination so that you can transmit it to them. If we have faulty, self-defeating images of our future, we will fall and we will be defeated. We've got to cultivate our own personal imaginations and transmit that power to our children and our grandchildren, to use their imagination to see the good that is possible for them to do. And that's what great movies really do. They inspire us. They inspire kids. You see, wow, look what he did. Sure, there's tough times. No good is ever achieved without great effort. But it inspires kids. I'm prepared to do that effort. What needs to be done is simple. Often it's simple, but difficult. Oh, that's simple for me to do. It's hard work to get up every morning at the same time, to go to bed at the same time, to do the exercise or whatever. You see kids who are inspired in that in sports. That happens a lot. Good coaches really know how to inspire the imagination of their coaching kids. And kids rise to that because they can see themselves. The guy can see himself doing a touchdown. And he's prepared to get out there and work day after day after day after day to gradually increase his skill. Now, we need to be doing that, particularly in the area of human love, of the love of the male for the female, of the way God has made us to complement each other. You have to plant that picture deep into the heart, mind, soul, and imagination of your child, that you are made for one and the other is made for one. Hold off. Develop that self-control. Your sexuality, by the way, will be a lot better. Porn is the way to impotence. The poor guys, they can't perform. The pure man, the man who learns sexual self-control, who doesn't masturbate, we're all adults here. He learns sexual self-control, and he can pleasure his wife much, much longer. The poor guy who masturbates or watches porn, no good. Can't please a woman. Now, there's a time and a place to tell that to your sons and daughters. I'm doing shorthand here. But this has got to be transmitted. You want to be sexually potent. God wants us. God has made sexual to take care of husband and wife. Fathers, you've got to grow sons who understand this. And in order to be a great sexual partner, you have to be pure. If you're not, you're taking from your sexual capacity. Now, how many of us here believe this? How many of us here transmit this to our sons and daughters? If not, change the image you have in your imagination. Harness the potential that God has given you. Go back into your own experience of your own true love, of that which God has blessed you most. And because this is so intimate, this cannot be transmitted except in special occasions, special places, but the child knows it's extra special. The message comes across with power. I'm going to close with this. The great law of existence, the way God has made us, is the way He is Himself. He's made us in His image and likeness. And the one thing we know about God is He's constantly, constantly gifting us. It's the law of the gift. We are made to give. And the more we give, the more we grow, the happier we are. But the happier we make others. Our own happiness comes from making others happy, which means we've got to learn to give all the time. So your children have to see you give to each other. And then you have to give to them. And what's the most precious thing you can give them? Your time. Therefore, I think family dinner, family meals are critical. Father leaving work to come home. It's more important I spend time with my children than earning the extra couple of $1,000 so that I can do X, Y, Z. Because with time, you give your love. If you're not giving your time, you're not giving yourself, and you're fooling yourself. It's the law of the gift. From where do we get the strength to act that way? Only by going to Him. Only by being united with Him. That's how you have the best sex. Thank you very much.
I've listened to Pat many, many times, and I never knew he was an evangelist. But since he talked about the law of the gift, you're really becoming an evangelical. You've got to be worried about this. Psalm 115 says what? The fruit of the womb is a reward for the Lord. It's the only reward we're going to have with us for eternity. When you raise up your children in the way they should go, they will be with you for everything else disappears. Everything else, all is dross. So just remember that your children are the future. But you know, we have a tremendous battle in the adversary. I hope you don't mind if I put it in the terms of the adversary, is attacking at all fronts. You go to schools. I used to be head of a department at City University of New York, head of a department at Berkeley. Sex education in schools at a young age violates children in an incredible way. And if you have a Christian worldview, you believe that that's the adversary, that he's been trying to kill the seed ever since the beginning because the seed is going to bruise his head. And if you have a Marxist, materialist worldview, what does Marx say? He wants to destroy the individual. He wants to abolish the family, abolish religion, abolish the nation. This is happening. You could reduce it all to Marxism or any one of these principles and abolish property. So everything that you are standing for, there are forces standing against it. And I used to be on that side of standing against it. I understand the appeal of standing against it. But the truth of the matter is that, you know, pleasure is like a mirage. That's what I tell my kids. You keep taking the next hit, the next drug, the next, snort of Coke or whatever it is, and you think, boy, this is good, but it's not as good as they told me it would be, so you take some more, and you take some more, and finally you're pursuing that mirage until, like an old Looney Tune cartoon, you're just this skeleton that's on the floor of the desert out there, truthfully. And if you stop for a minute and say, this is not fulfilling me, and turn around, Jesus is always there with the water of life that'll get you away from the desert. So that's my sermon since he got me into this mood. Love is not tolerance. Tolerance is not caring about your children. One great mind said, do you tolerate your children taking drugs? My father did, because he was on Broadway and we took drugs together. Do you tolerate your children staying up all night? Do you tolerate your children doing illicit activities? Do you tolerate your children skipping school? If you love your children, you go and you sit with them before they go to bed. You sit with them when they get up in the morning. You talk to them. You spend time with them. You play with them. This is a great psychiatrist who said he was presented with children that he was told that they needed Ritalin for ADD, which is a product of our age, according to Dr. Robert Morse. And he said, I don't think they need Ritalin. Give me 2 months. Just make sure that they limit their gaming to 30 minutes a week. You don't cut it out entirely so they get angry. You can have 30 minutes a week. That's your treat, or go to a movie once a week or whatever else. Give them that time. But then the rest of the week, do your homework. Get them to bed early. Rich just said that. Give them 3 nutritious meals. It was interesting because the doctor said that half of the mothers didn't know what a nutritious meal was. They thought it was a Reese's Pieces. Get them outside, play with them and engage in conversation. After 2 months, 90% of the children had no signs of ADD. None. And the 10% that did was because their parents didn't love their children enough to limit their gaming, get them to bed early, care enough, because caring is the only daring. I had this conversation with somebody in the room the other day. He said, I don't care. You have to care. As Christians, we believe that caring is the only daring. Even Steve Jobs, the late Steve Jobs, we limit how much technology our kids use at home, asking the right questions, talk about the title, the images, the ideas, the plot. Look at this. Have your children develop their own standards. Do they want to see animals being mutated? No. Eaten, killed, animals being tortured? No. Well, then if they go to a movie, and there was a movie 2 years ago where an animal's head got cut off as a joke, tell them, you shouldn't be going to that movie. You've already made a decision. You're not going to go to see this. You've got to get them to develop their standards based on the values that you've given them. So God loves us. He doesn't tolerate evil. And get the book. Get the 6-week course. and you can learn how to teach your kids to be media wise.